Hello and welcome to Mattanory The Essex Tales. I'm not sure how clearly you can see from this image here, but in the distance there is lovely Leigh-on-Sea, which is quite a historic old fishing town where the cockleboats would come and sell their wares and lots of other stories associated with it. And this is going to be one of those tales. Right now I'm on an island called Two Tree Island. Now, Two Tree Island today is a place for people to go walking on the nature reserve, for people to launch their little boats in the slipway over here. At the moment, we seem to be having some youngsters on their little dirt bikes going up and down, making a lot of noise, God bless them. And there's also a lot of people in the evening like to come in their cars and just park up, whilst other people walking their dogs like to have a little look inside. I don't know what they're up to, but this story is nothing to do with any of that. So right now we are looking out to the Thames. All around we can see lots of little creeks and little tiny streams and rivers that sort of meander out to the sea, and it's always has been quite a busy line for the boats to go up and down. Today they'd be docking at Tilbury, and they did that for many years. Further back than that, they probably would have gone to London. But some boats wouldn't have gone that far, for they were smugglers. And this island is a fantastic place to hide boats and hide all sorts of bits and pieces that you've brought in from the continent and beyond. If you think of smuggling, you're thinking of a man who would be sort of bringing in some stuff that he shouldn't have from abroad, sometimes from the continent, sometimes from further away. But this story, and it is a true story, I promise, is a story about a female smuggler. I'm struggling to talk right now, I guess. It's about a female smuggler. It's called A Strange Funeral. So, Leigh-on-Sea, over there, boasted a very fine lady smuggler. Her name was Elizabeth Little, and she was quite elegant, well known in high society. She threw some very nice parties and had the most refined of all company. And you would never have guessed that she dabbled in contraband goods. She was a draper, and in her genteel shop there was all sorts of silk and lace, perfume, and of course gin and brandy. And much of those goods, well, let's say the taxman didn't know much about. It sort of came in a slightly different way. And she, Elizabeth, was involved in the smuggling trade, which was functioning right out of Leigh-on-Sea over there. In around the 1840s, she didn't just organise the business side of things, but she often would sail to the continent on smuggling expeditions, and with her two brothers. One was called William and one was called Tom. She was a very good sailor. She quickly proved herself perfectly easy at handling the boat and the crew. I don't think she took any prisoners. One occasion, however, she did nearly get herself into trouble, and this is where this story starts. It began with a bit of a blunder. She and her crew were late leaving Ostend, which meant they reached the Thames with the tide against them, and to make matters worse, there was a Coast Guard cutter in wait for them. Quickly, they hoisted more sail, more haste, less speed, they'd say. But in the process, Elizabeth's brother Bob was wounded in the arm. There was nothing to do but to go back to the shallow waters of Shoebury Point and Barling Creek, which is just over there. The crew quickly told Elizabeth it was a bad decision. When the tide goes out, we're going to be stranded, like rats in a trap. And they're going to come and get us. And with poor old Bob over there, and all the stuff on board, what are we going to do? Elizabeth was not only a good sailor, but she was very intelligent and quick at thinking. And she came up with a plan. Some of you boys are going to take Bob and all the stuff overland, while the rest of you are going to sail the empty boat right under their noses and take it back down to lee. The plan was even more complicated, but she didn't tell the men everything all at once. So she just sent William to Mr. Benningworth, who was the local undertaker, for a horse and carriage, and then William returned to the boat. The crew then realised what she was doing. Bob was put in the coffin, and the smuggled goods were laid all on the floor of the hearse. To make it more convincing, Elizabeth seated herself at the front of the carriage and huddled in a black shawl and sobbed into a fine lace handkerchief. Nearly everyone they met bent their heads respectfully as the hearse passed. Only when they neared Eden Lodge was there a nasty moment. Now, Eden Lodge is just down there. It's not there anymore, but it was at the bottom of Lee Hill. Sadly, they came across a customs officer who suspected something was up. He was just standing there. The undertaker, who was standing in front of the hearse leading it, went pale. He was sure he was about to be arrested, but the customs officer raised his hat and lowered his head and his eyes as a mark of respect. It was more than the undertaker could bear almost. He held his handkerchief tightly to his mouth to try and stifle his laughter. And that night, the empty boat safely came into the harbour. The harbour master inspected it. There was just an empty boat on a pleasure cruise at night. William, he moored the ship, and the whole family had a nice celebration with the finest of all French brandies. Bob's wounds were attended to, the hearse put away in the stable at the back of the house of the undertaker, and nobody was any of the wiser about the strange double life of Elizabeth, the elegant draper.